Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. Welcome to your #1 source for Native American television news. It's Native News Today, and I am Jason Salzman, joining you from the Muskogee Media Studios. We have a very special, extra special episode for you today. In studio just a few weeks ago, the founder of the American Indian movement back in the late 60s and then all through the 70s with the high-profile things happening at the Pine Ridge Reservation and on into now, with now his 5th longest walk across the country, bringing awareness to the drug problem and domestic violence in our Indian communities, Mr. Dennis Banks. We now provide you with this, him visiting in studio with us, talking about himself and the American Indian movement. All right, we're joined now by a co-founder in 1968 of the American Indian Movement, Minneapolis, Minnesota there, and also an author, activist, a lecturer, Mr. Dennis Banks in studio today. Dennis, thanks so much for being with us here at Muskogee Media. We love having you.
Oh, great being here. I want to just say one thing first. I am the principal founder of the American Indian Movement.
Right.
I'm the one that went knocking door to door for almost a month and a half, and finally people... We had several meetings before the actual first meeting took place. George Mitchell, Harold Goodsky, myself, and those were kind of the principal movers behind what was about to happen. We didn't realize how it was going to take off, but it did take off.
Now, these were the streets of Minneapolis there.
Yes.
And you were pulling the neighborhood and people together to fight police brutality.
That was the main reason. It was just bad. I mean, every weekend people would be rounded up and taken to the courts, but they'd be all beaten up when they come out. And so, and then when we started mentioning that, this is about 6 months before the meeting, we started getting complaints, and we had a lot of information before the initial meeting of AIM, and to call say police brutality was one of the worst brutality centers in the world. At least that's the way we felt. We had the information before us already, so we had documentation there. So.
And it's crazy because, you know, we see, that's 1968, we still see instances like just a few weeks ago in Winslow, Arizona, on the border town there of the Navajo Nation with the native woman. Actually, that's made national headlines too.
Terrible.
And still all this time later,
and the guy's record is now coming out where he was brutal in 5 other jobs that he had as a police officer, and he's released each time. And again, he's going to be released out of this one, but they should drag him to court. As a matter of fact, I've asked Larry Anderson, who is our point man in AIM on the res, if they would compile some information, maybe a couple of pages of what happened there, and we're going to go to the Justice Department and see if we can get a civil suit going against that guy.
We talk about too, like dealing with the same issues now, all this time later. What's it been like for you to start up, you know, in 68 and 73, you know, we go move over to the Pine Ridge Reservation and things happen there. But what's it been like for you to see how it was then compared to how it is now and what AIM's doing now?
Well, ironically, the same issues about the police, it's still there. As a matter of fact, it's becoming much more subtle, and in some cases, a lot more outright brutality, just like what we saw in Winslow. We were there. We were there that morning well, they're not in Winslow, but we were up at Zuni, And we were talking about the brutality of the police. And then this thing was happening as we were in conference there. And then it we'd moved on up to Shiprock, and then we said, what happened? What? We were right there near Winslow. And the picture across the country, we've become a lot more stronger in terms of action-orientated people, and we see a lot of activity going on, a lot more activity than we did in 1966, 1967. Like people were taking the beatings and not saying anything. And even this walk about domestic violence, it's been there for a long time, years, even years before I was born. And now we see, if we can get it to the surface and start the discussion about it, start talking about it, then it'll start coming out.
Well, that topic there is one that our department has always focused on and worked very closely with our people in the Family Violence Prevention Program. Now we're looking at rooting out the problem within our own people. It's like the ancient ways of thinking that a man could do what he wanted to with his wife or his girlfriend or whatever is being challenged, and many of the young women, the older women in our communities are speaking up, saying they've had enough. They don't want to deal with this anymore. Now, what is the walk calling for in terms of change on the subject of domestic violence?
Well, first of all, I'd like to, you know what, when I used to go to the movies, even the silent movies, there was a lot of slapping going on with the women, men slapping women, James Cagney and a lot of other leading heroes of the time, slapping their wives, slapping their women. And so we were being almost programmed that that was all right. And so, but what I would like to see happening, and is we're formulating it now, is to see when this first happens, and see if we can have a family court, and so that so some counseling can come about right away between the perpetrator and the victim. See if before it goes to sentencing, and see if we can get them back together, and both of them go through counseling, and with the understanding to the perpetrator that if this doesn't work, then we will go ahead with the sentencing part of this, and then this means you're going to jail. I hate to see especially a family man or family break up, and then there's children involved. Then the father they can't see his children. Children can't see the father, and in rare cases, it is the female also has been a perpetrator. So I would like to see that happen first before once the person goes to prison, then inevitably it'll break up the family.
The Longest Walk started, as activism. You start looking at the 11 bills that were pending at the time, and then you move on to everything from diabetes awareness to sacred sites, which tied you close for our own very Muskogee Creek Nation, what we're dealing with from Ogiabova, our hickory ground.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what that's been for you, each walk, but also, having that connection with us as Muskogee Creek Nation with what's going on in Alabama?
Yeah, of course the Peltier Walk drew a lot of attention. We did 2 walks already for Peltier. The president, the closest hope we had was Bill Clinton. And then things started to unravel for Bill Clinton. I mean, the FBI was on his case, and I think that there was some sort of a deal struck where, hey, look, don't bother me, and I won't release Peltier. I think that was the exchange there, because there was a lot of, we did a lot of concentration with Clinton administration. We met Reno and Janet Reno. I met with her, and she said we've been getting a lot of calls, a lot of telephone calls, a lot of emails and letters. Dennis, she said we're looking at it very seriously. So, and then things happened, and then Peltier was still in there. So after 40-some years now, he's still in there, and we hope Obama again will give another close shot at it.
Well, I'm glad you brought up President Obama. I was going to ask you about the possibilities of a release for Peltier, but also the job that he's been doing with tribal governments. He's drawing them closer to the White House than had ever been done before, at least publicly. So what do you think of the job that Obama's done as far as relations with Native American people?
I think they've been good. I think they've been great in some places, and then I think exceptional in other areas as well. Of course, the Democrats feel that he's sold out, but once you become a president, you follow. You gotta if you want to go along, you got to get along in there, and it's the same old. I mean. I think the worst president of the United States has been Andrew Jackson, and I hear they're talking about taking him off the $20 bill. And I've always said, for many, many years, I've said, this is the worst president the United States ever had with Native people. So, but I see, he's been very close to Native people. Received an Indian name up there in Crow Country. He's visited many reservations and came to Pine Ridge. He's been to, I think he was up here in El Reno too, visiting a tribe up here before he went to the...
Choctaws.
Yeah, before he went over to El Reno. I think that his scorecard is good, very, very good in terms of relationships with Native people. But I think there's still, like we hope, we're getting mixed signals. We're getting signals from the White House that he's asked questions about Peltier, and so when he starts asking questions about it, then we know that even when he was a senator, of course, he received information about Peltier then, I don't know. He's really our last hope to bring him home. I sat in a federal appeals court, 10th Circuit Court, in 8th Circuit rather, when the judge asked the prosecutor, the same prosecutor who said that Peltier aimed his rifle and shot Williams, and then Kohler, and then Williams, in cold blood, and the judge asked the same prosecutor 16 years later, what hard evidence that you have that Peltier killed the agents? And the prosecutor said, Your Honor, we don't know who killed the agents. And the judge became angry. He said, no, wait a minute. He's started looking around there, and he pulls up a file. He said, you said 16 years ago that Peltier shot Kohler in cold blood and then Williams. And now you tell us that you don't know who killed the agents? He said, there's something wrong with those statements. And anyway, and we thought for sure that Peltier would be released. But they said on a technicality that should have been raised at the time that he spoke those words. And since he didn't hear no objection, they thought that was it. But we felt that he should have been released. So, and there was the whole trial is filled with a lot of fabrication that the FBI did with Myrtle Poorbear. She had 3 affidavits that they wanted her to sign. One of them was to get Peltier extradited back from Canada. They used three affidavits. The first one was she submitted wasn't strong enough. Went back, and they said, you got to tighten it up a little bit more. And that one wasn't good. And the third one, they finally had to accept it. She said she saw Peltier kill the agents. That's what gave Canada, you know, they extradited him then.
Now, the issue of freedom for Peltier has kind of been one of the mainstays of the American Indian movement over the decades. It's always been in the forefront of the activities and things that you wanted to see happen for Native people. With this Longest Walk 5, we're seeing focus on drugs and domestic violence, as we've discussed. And I saw an article that talked about this walk and a phrase that said, the economics of survival is the cause for drug abuse. Now, is that something you agree with, or you would explain, or would you disagree with that statement?
I think it has a lot to do with the violence. When a man loses his job, and he's not the breadwinner anymore, and then they have to go on welfare. The woman goes to applies for welfare and gets it, and all of a sudden, you know, the role has changed. He's no longer the breadwinner, and so he goes out and things happen. You know, he might start drinking, comes home, gets mad, and he's terribly upset because it seems like he's lost his authority as the breadwinner, and things begin to happen. And I know that there, on this walk, men have been talking to us, women have been talking to us about the violence, generation after generation. They saw violence in their home. And the men now, we've had 4 men. One of them broke down crying, saying, yes, I've beaten my wife. I've beaten her 3, 4 times. He says, and only because, you know, I feel ashamed. I'm not working anymore, and I just, you know, my children don't. It seems like I've lost respect for my for my children. To me, the economic picture in this country has caused some of that to happen. Not all of it, of course. Whereas the people with jobs still are involved with domestic violence. So it's a hard call on domestic violence, especially if there's been generation of violence. One woman, when I went to her home, she's had a sign that says, a big sign in her home says, I stayed with my husband so that my children could have a father. And I left my husband so that my children could have a mother. And that didn't hold true for my granddaughter. And she died a very violent death. And not only violent, but the mutilation of her body, and the guy trying to destroy her whole body with propane, with gasoline, and with using the styrofoam plates, crushed them all up, put them on her body, and then torched her. That becomes like napalm when it's burning. Tried to destroy, almost did destroy her entire body, except that the way that they had put her in that grave, shallow grave, they had to double up her body, and so she had some intestines. They got the DNA from the intestines that still hadn't burned, but the rest of her body was just. I think he should, and now he's the district attorney. They've struck a deal with him. It was against our wishes. We wanted it to go to the grand jury, but I don't know why they didn't. I'm still gonna, when I'm going back on May 3rd for one of the hearings, I'm still gonna object to him making a deal. He doesn't deserve to make a deal. And I don't know why they're even making a deal with him to begin with. But the whole thing about domestic violence is a hard call. And
well, let me ask you this. Is the tactic of a walk across the country going to be effective in curbing that violence, in bringing it more to the forefront for our own people to deal with. In some cases, somebody might say, "Well, that's part of our dirty laundry," kind of thing.
I think it's Gary. I think it's gonna be the beginning of at least discussions coming to the table. I think there's going to be more of that. I talked to a judge in Minnesota just recently. As a matter of fact, in the last week, who had called me about a man who's possibly going to prison. And he asked me, the judge asked me, he said, "Is there any program, Dennis, that we have available?" He says, "Because I've talked to him and his wife," he says, "and they want to try and keep the marriage together." So people are talking about it, and I think once we start talking about it, there's two thoughts, as I said. I want to try and get it into a counseling situation first, and then if not, then understanding if it happens again, then somebody's got to understand that if they keep doing this, then it becomes a crime, a very hard criminal act, which then something I really want to take it out of the criminal justice system and put it into a domestic court, so to speak. I want to see. And I'm moving towards a position with drugs and all the drugs out there to legalize the drugs, because prohibition in this country didn't work. You know, when people couldn't drink beer, they were manufacturing it in their home. Barrels and barrels were coming from Canada, and it didn't work. And only FDR finally said, "Hey, the gangsters are making more money than we are." So they decriminalized it, and they ended prohibition. And now, billions of gallons of beer are made, and it's controlled, and it's taxed. If we can do the same thing with drugs, control it, monitor it, tax it, and let's have more clinics that can monitor a little and administer a little bit of drugs to those people who are shaking and screaming, and then take it out of the criminal justice system. We've got more people in prison in the United States than all of Western Europe has for all their criminals in their jails, even the ones murdering and robberies and rapes. And we have more people in our prisons than anybody else in the world. If we took all of our prisoners in the United States, place them in one area, we would have the 35th most populous state in the nation. That's how many people that we have in prison right now. I talked to a mother, and I looked at the court case. There's 2 guys doing prison terms, it's 2 years, for possessing paraphernalia of drugs. They had no drugs in their car. They didn't have drugs. But just for having paraphernalia, oh my God! What is paraphernalia? If somebody has tools that aren't those burglary tools in some other context? If you're carrying condoms, is that is that paraphernalia for rape? But for possessing, my God, there's 2 18-year-old kids that are doing 2 years in jail for that. When they get out, criminal record's going to follow them all along. They're not going to be able to go to work right away because they're carrying paraphernalia. So decriminalize that and there are kids like that. There's men and women and children, even children, carry stuff around with them that could be construed as paraphernalia. So it's the criminal justice system has just been terribly wrong in how it's handling we're going to have to slow down. I mean, it won't be the 35th most populous state anymore. It might be number 1. Everybody, my God, it's terrible what the criminal justice system looks like in terms of handling crimes against people who carry stuff or possess it. In some cases, marijuana now is legal in some states. You know, and some people in that same state of California are still doing time for smoking marijuana. It's absurd what's going on. You know, like when Russell Means and I were facing the justice system in South Dakota, you know, for the Wounded Knee incidents, we were facing 250 years in prison plus a life sentence. And I was telling, when he was reading off all these indictments against us, I said, Russ, you do the 250 years, I'll do the life sentence.
Now you mentioned Russell Means there, who passed away not too long ago, and Vernon Belcourt passed away some years ago, seemingly leaving yourself and Clyde Belcourt as the most visible leaders of American Indian movement. Where are you now? What is there a way you can kind of describe the status of AIM since these changes? And I guess since all of us are getting a little older there, where's AIM now?
Well, in 2008, when we ended the Longest Walk 2, 30 years after the first walk, I handed out 4 staffs to people and saying, it's time for you guys now, and women, 2 men and 2 women, and I said, it's time that you guys step up to the plate. I said, you got to let us older guys step back a little bit and move up to the plate. And so far, nobody's moved up.
And there you have it. And that's not the entire interview there. If you want to watch the entire interview, it's in our Elder Conversation series. It's actually our second installment with Dennis Banks. That is on the website. Go to our online channel, YouTube, or go to MuskogeeMedia.com. See it in our video section there. You can go and see the entire conversation there with Dennis Banks. And we know we let it run long, and that was the entirety of the episode today, but Dennis Banks in Indian circles, he's kind of like E.F. Hutton. You know, when he talks, you listen. So it's a great thing that we had him come through here on that. It's great work that he's doing with the Longest Walk, and we want to encourage everybody, MuskogeeMedia.com, all new, all kinds of videos, content, news, all things Muskogee Creek Nation right there at your fingertips. Go on, check it out, and stay up with us on all of our online outlets, all of our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, the whole 9 yards. Everybody out there, have a great week, and make it a good one. We'll see you guys next time right here on Native News Today.